Welcome to Just Talking About Jesus. I'm Jan Johnson, a seasoned believer who loves relationships and, just talking about Jesus. Welcome, my friends, to episode 41 of Just Talking About Jesus. Last week, we heard from Amy Miles, who's an abortion survivor and tells her story. If you haven't taken time to listen to that episode, do it now. Nowadays, we in the United States aren't familiar with orphanages because they no longer exist. But they are common in underdeveloped countries, and they aren't always well managed, maintained, or ethical. I don't know about you, but I grew up in a home where my parents were divorced, and my mom managed our family of 4 kids as a single parent. There were things that weren't that great, but let me tell you, my life didn't even begin to compare to that of today's guest. I can't imagine living in an orphanage with 800 kids and 1 adult to 60 children, or being sexually abused on a regular basis since the age of 6. My guest today is Lilia Kleczinski. Today she'll share the horrific yet wonderful story of God's redeeming plan for her life.
I was about probably 9 or 10. I had wanted to leave and run away from that orphanage. I wanted to just leave that forsaken place. It was just horrible. And I wanted to run. And so I ran behind the buildings, and there was a forest there. And I ran into the forest, but little did I realize I was going to trip, and it rolled me all the way down into a heavy, thick pond. I had started to drown when there was nobody around. I mean, it's early morning. Everybody's in the cafeteria eating and stuff. And I had started to drown. There was no way to grab it because it was so steep. There was
No bank
to grab onto. So I had started to drown when I became so exhausted, and I had let go. I had just let go. I had remembered in that time where I just felt like it was time. I knew I was going to die.
Lilia Kleczinski, welcome to Just Talking About Jesus. So happy to have you here.
I'm Lilia Kleczinski, and hello, fellow Christians. I'm Lilia Kleczinski. And here's just a quick about me. I was born in the early 80s in a small country called Moldova. As most of you now know, where it may be located, after facing a challenging start, I spent the first 3 years of my life in the hospital due to premature birth and medical complications. When only at about 4 pounds for a baby to survive at that weight in that time was very uncommon due to lack of medical care. Later, I was transported to an orphanage, a place that served as a World War II military ground located in a nearby village. And that's where I lived with about 800 children until about age 15. Moldova quickly gained a nickname for the unwanted large number of children, the dumping grounds. So post-World War II, there was more women than there was men. And the procreation was at its best, I guess you could say. And so the Moldova sat on the far west side of the Soviet Union territory, and just a larger influx of children. And they didn't know what to do from 12 countries, all these children, because there was more men had passed away, very few men. All these women are having babies, and there's no one to take care for them. And so the government decided that Moldova would be the best place for it, the designated spot. And so that's where we ended up, one of many, many, many orphanages, and many different types of orphanages.
Mm.
And in that environment, I just wanted to add as well, it's a very closed system to the outside of the orphanage case. There was no talk of any faith or any higher power. Our only understanding of God, lowercase, was serving the red flag under the regime of Vladimir. So that was our God, unfortunately.
Yeah, but you didn't know any different.
That's all there was to it.
Yeah.
Growing up.
Yeah, and you didn't know anything differently from that at that point. What was life like for you in the orphanage?
Oh, goodness gracious. It was, the discipline in many cases seemed very unfair. I mean, physical abuse was very common. let me go back a little bit. In that time, there was about one individual, one adult per 40 to 60 children.
Oh
And
my.
so physical abuse was very common, harsh discipline, just many different forms. It was very hard. Just to give you one small example of how cruel it was at times. When I was just about 3 years old and I had just arrived to the orphanage, I was getting ready for bed with one of my brand new friends, and she says, Lilia, you're sleeping next to me, but hurry up and get under the covers and pretend you're sleeping if you can't fall asleep fast enough. So it was something like that. And I said, why? She said, the witch is coming. I didn't know what that was. And so, anyway, as it got dark outside, all of a sudden the door swung open and I'm under my covers and I could barely breathe. And I tried really hard to remain as super quiet as possible, but my covers flew back when the lady dressed in black, the supposed witch, said, you follow me. So it was me and about 5 other children that couldn't fall asleep in time. And when I had just arrived to the orphanage, those same hallways that I walked through, they were beautiful in the daytime. There was lots of colors, painted characters on the walls. It was so beautiful. I was really fascinated by all that. But they were not the same hallways in the nighttime. They became the most horrifying memories of my life in that time. And she led us to the bathroom. And the bathrooms in our country, or at least where I grew up, in this small village of Moldova, it had holes in the ground.
Mm.
So in this particular bathroom, it had like 5 holes in the ground, and the holes are about, I don't know, 6 to 8 inches approximately in diameter. So they're pretty good size. And we were very, very little in that time. And yeah, the little ones had fallen through in the past in that time. And it was one of those times when I heard she gave us a brush and said, start scrubbing. This was pitch black, by the way. There's no lights of any kind. And we were scrubbing when I heard the screeching outcry and shuffling in the room. And she grabbed the child out and he smelled awful. But I just remembered that was one of my earliest memories that I had of the most, like my first experience of traumatic experience. And so, yeah, Jen, you could say I have gained the gift of being able to fall asleep really, really fast from that moment on. I mean, I'm making light of it. I know, but I don't mean to do it that way. But I literally learned to fall asleep really fast from that time on. To this day, I still have.
You were living with anxiety, and anxiety doesn't help you relax enough to go to sleep either.
I was living with fear in that time, and whatever they said goes, and fear ruled in that time. Fear really ruled. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jen.
That's okay. How long did you live in the orphanage?
I was in the orphanage from age about 3 to 15 until I was adopted.
And then, so who adopted you?
So I want to go back, Jen, really quick. So my early years this was growing up during the communist times. It was still very provided for us. Lots of things were still given to us when it comes to 3 meals a day and clothes on our back and school time and everything else. There was a regime, there was rules, there was just everything was just so. And order, a lot of order. In my, let's say about first, second grade, I don't know, I was about 8 or 9 years old or something like that, maybe even earlier, probably 6 or 7 years old when I first went to first grade. Right in that time, we were still under the regime of the flag of the Soviet Union. Well, we were headed back from the cafeteria back at nighttime, and we were just going to bed when it was just one of those nights when all of a sudden there was just heavy, girls were in their own rooms, boys were in their own rooms, and there was just heavy weight on top of me, all suddenly out of nowhere. Granted, Jan, I just told you I knew how to fall asleep really fast, so this was unexpected. This was my first sexual abuse that I experienced, and the next morning I I was more worried about feeling shame, like smelling bad. I reeked of alcohol and cigarettes. I had sticky stuff, white stuff on me. I was just covered in that filth so much. I tried to secretly escape and run into the bathroom and clean myself up the best that I could, but nothing was ever the same ever again from then on. And those nights came, and now I had learned to not be able to fall asleep because most of my nights I had spent on the windowsill, fascinated by the moon and just afraid to go to bed. The moon had just sort of kind of became my best friend, you could say, in that time. And so about a few months later, it was one of those nights where again another man showed up, and this time I ran under the bed and I barely just escaped it. But what I hadn't realized was I was like a coward, basically, in a way where my friend next to me, the bed was creaking and making all kinds of noise, and I knew she was getting abused as well. And it was one of those things, Jen. We never talked about it. None of us girls ever were able to share these type of things. We were all ashamed, and we were just feeling just well, what could we do? It was like the normal way of life per se.
Well, and you didn't
And in that,
understand any of it, you know?
I didn't. I was just trying to get through whatever it was. And in that time, I mean, obviously, in that time, what I understood, what I would hear is corruption was at its highest. For a bottle of vodka, there was one man that was supposed to be watching the entire orphanage. And for a bottle of vodka, this is what would get you at times. So, yes, unfortunately, that existed. And Jen, that existed pretty much all the way to my 15 years of my life in there. From there on, a few years later or so, communism had come to a halt. It was like a dead stop when all of a sudden all of our basics that we had was not coming in anymore. In the village that I grew up in, all we had and all that I've ever known was a baker, a butcher, and a dairy. And that's it. That's all we ever had. And so all of that stopped coming. All, our basic clothes were just more worn out to where we felt the need to have leave orphanage without permission, oftentimes outside the gates, and go find food and rummage for ourselves. It was very, very common. We would go and steal. A lot of older girls with probably sex trafficking and anything for a piece of bread. That's just how it was in that time. It was very cruel.
And so
Ugh.
but then there were people who were adopting out of the orphanage?
In that time, okay, so during the fall of the communism, we had a new director that came to the orphanage. So now we're switching from not speaking Russian and only speaking Romanian. So now we're speaking Romanian at all times. In that time, I want to rewind for a quick second, a couple of years earlier, but the new director was already in place, actually. He had purchased some campground a few kilometers down the road, and now it was time for us to be able to go to camp in the summertime. And it was one of those times where it was a preset ambush. It was a group of kids. We were supposed to exchange goods amongst ourselves when out of nowhere, the bully girl that was in charge of us, they basically beat me up really, really hard to the point of where I just didn't want to live. I was about probably 9 or 10, right in that age bracket. And what had happened is I had wanted to leave and run away from that orphanage. And would not have been the first time. It's just I wanted to just leave that forsaken place. It was horrible. And I wanted to run. And so what had happened that morning, a lot of kids had already run to the cafeteria and I had stayed behind. So I ran behind the buildings and there was a forest there. And I ran into the forest, but little did I realize I was going to trip and it rolled me all the way down into a heavy, thick pond. I had started to drown when there was nobody around. I mean, it's early morning. Everybody's in the cafeteria eating and stuff. And I had started to drown. There was no way to grab it because it was so steep. There was no place to
No
to
bank.
grab onto, no bank at all. And so I had started to drown when I became so exhausted, and I just basically I had let go. I had just let go. I had remembered in that time where I just felt like it was time. I knew I was going to die. I had come to that place. I'm dying, and I'm just going to drown. This is the way for me. And started sinking more and more. I couldn't see the light anymore. It was pitch black. I couldn't hear the earth sounds, no birds, none of that. And I just, as I was reaching to the very lowest of that, all of a sudden there was this power just came out of nowhere. Jan, it's like reliving the moment when I tell the story every time because it was that powerful. The powerful is just not that power. I can't describe it in words. I did the best to put it on paper in my book, and the chapter is called Peace at the Depths of Despair. But I did receive peace at the very bottom, and I was ready to pass when that power just came up out of nowhere and just started pushing me upwards from under my feet. It brought me all the way up, but by that time I was already on the other side because I was fighting to get through. And it moved me, I guess, or something. I had a little bank there. I grabbed onto the branches. I pulled myself over. I was exhausted, but there was an openness field and vastness of it just right there, not far. And it was my first time there. I I walked into it, and as if like I walked into some sort of realm of this beauty. I couldn't describe it. It was like the first time, Jen, I saw the sky for the first time, and the beauty of it just captivated me. I knew that there was a power existed, and I was just so amazed by it. I wondered, what was it? What is beyond that sky? What was it that just pulled me up? I was without words. I knew that I passed out. I was so exhausted and so overwhelmed by this, whatever this was in that time. I woke up at midday, hot sun on top of me, and by the evening, I was ready to go back to the orphanage, and I was ready to face the day because I knew no matter what came my way, whatever this was, it saved me already once.
Mhm.
And so that's just the beginning.
And that's where your first God encounter was.
My encounter there, Jen, what was born in that time was the strength of faith. There was a foundation of faith. I didn't know what that faith was, but I knew there's a great power that exists in this universe that is just beyond and absolutely unimaginable. And so I knew there was nothing in this world that I cannot face anymore where I have to feel. I knew that I was never alone.
Mhm.
I was never alone. The strength of faith was the strongest.
You had a
Uh,
rescuer.
yes, it was. Yeah. Every time I speak of it, I don't even know how to put in words. I struggle to find the right words for this, whatever this was.
So
And then,
I'm picturing this event happens, and basically Jesus has saved you from that, but now you're the swamp monster walking back into the orphanage. That's
I know. Well, we were dirty, Jen. We were dirty anyway because we didn't have like sandals or shoes in the summertime, so we were barefoot. It was a normal. It was just the norm for us. We were better off barefoot everywhere. But yeah, we were already filthy and dirty and stinky. It was just so bad. But going back to school that year, we started that following year. We started receiving missionaries coming into the orphanage because the times had gotten so bad. We were desperate. We were desperate for food. We were desperate for clothes, and the director allowed for the missionaries to start coming in. And these were villagers that came by that came not far from where we were, about 12 kilometers or so. And when we first saw them, they were they were dressed so colorful and so like I've not seen much color in that time. Period. I mean, for us, our regular simple brown dresses is all we've had. Gray tights, and it was just there was no color. And they were dressed in color, and they had head coverings, and they just looked it was such a pleasant sight to see women, and they're just so beautiful, and men. And so what had happened is they didn't come by themselves. They also brought truckloads of oranges and bread for us. It was actually right around Easter time. And so Pascha, I didn't know what it was at that time because they were introducing it to us for the first time. And so let me tell you that citrus orange, that little slice, because there was about 800 of us, and they had to make that quantity of, that basket in the Bible that where everything just multiplied. Well, we received that slice. So let me tell you, there was plenty of slices for everybody in there. But it was, let me tell you, I was loving that slice. It was the first thing I've ever tasted that tasted so good.
And sweet.
And the bread they brought to us was so sweet. It's a traditional bread only done in Eastern Europe during Easter. And it's basically sweet bread. And very fascinating. But they brought stories with them about this God and this guy named Jesus. I was like, sometimes it was like one year out the other. I was trying to connect. I was just about 14 years old, approximately, actually, in that time. And it was like, "What, really? Like, who's this guy, Jesus, they're talking about? Is he really capable of loving unconditionally? He really did part the waters and move the mountains, and he can bring the dead, the dead to life." I was the one. I heard those stories; they were fascinating. But the one that really grabbed me was that there was a man that existed in this world that is capable of loving unconditionally. Could there such a man that can exist that could love unconditionally? And in that time, for me to hear those type of stories, I was so skeptical. I mean, I was already 14 years old. I was already doing a lot of questioning, just questioning everything in that time. And yeah, it was short-lived. I love those stories that they told us. It was short-lived, but I was curious. I mean, I was like, wow, whatever this guy was, I mean, I was sure would love to meet him one day. It's like that kind of a thing. So it left me with that when, but it was the first time I experienced hearing about it for the first time. And it was about a year later. So I had the director allowed more and more people to come and consider a possibility of adoptions. I was always in the adoption list in that time. I've always had through the years people looking at me, possible parents looking at me. But a lot of times it was, she's too tall, she's too skinny, she's just not the right color for us and that color of the skin. There was just a lot of, so there was that tape that kept replaying in my head. I'm just not good enough.
Not good enough.
It was just not good. I'm not good enough. I'll never be able to. And now at this age, I'm like 15 years old and I'm going to be 16. I only have a year to go before I become an adult. So now an adult, they give you a pillow and a toothbrush, and outside the orphanage gates, you go and figure it out on your own. And Jen, let me tell you, that future did not,
Scary.
it did not look great at all. But so I wanted to rewind. In that very time, there was a lot of things happening because of the transition of the post-communism that took place. There was just so many things happening, a lot of just chaos, disorder. I mean, just a lot of new rules had to be implemented because of the fall of the communism. So everything is under the new regime now. It's new order, new everything. So in that time, some of us girls felt like we felt safe to finally go to this new director. This new director that took over, tall, young, very smiley kind of individual. For some reason, we felt like we could probably trust him. We could probably go to him and tell him what's going on. And so we did. There was a group of us that went and told him that older boys and drunken men were allowed to come in, and older boys from other classes. They've been taking advantage of us for many years. And it was like ocean waves of girls coming in. And all of a sudden, we're like, there's a lot of girls coming and telling the director what was happening. So a lot of turbulence. And so in that time, a lot of kids were in the classroom, and I was walking from one of the only shower building that we had. It was like it was only for us to take a shower and to shower this many kids, 5 minutes, ice cold water. I may have gotten lucky to get wet, even maybe get a drop on myself because it was like a herd of animals you're getting into there. I don't know, it's like 30, 40 girls under like 10 shower heads and only maybe three or four working, and then two adult women. And obviously they have the first take of those working shower heads. So anyway, I was walking from those shower buildings in that time by myself, and I saw that there was a music teacher walking in that same direction. It was behind the sleeping buildings when I saw an object fall from the third floor building. And as I made my way closer to whatever that was laying on the ground, I realized it was a human being. As I got closer, I had realized it was a young man, an individual that has taken advantage of us sexually, taken advantage sexually of me for many years. And his body was just twisted. It just looked deformed. The way it dropped, the way it landed, it just did not look right. He had already blood coming out of his mouth. There was a broken bottle of vodka right next to him and a smoldering cigarette. So I immediately knew whatever that was, it was his last. And the music teacher is looking at me, and I'm in a state of shock, and I'm just looking at this image. And it was just, I was locked up when he looks at me and says, "Hey, why are you standing there? Go get help." And I couldn't move. I froze. I paralyzed in place. And remembering all of the scenes and what was happening in that time, and the scenes of different places where he took advantage of the sexual and whatnot. And as the crowd grew larger and larger, because there was more people coming, and all of a sudden there was just like an entire orphanage there at the same time, a lot of the girls all of a sudden were like shouting and screaming, "Finally, he's dead. Finally, he's dead." They were so excited for that. But in that time, for me, that was the first time I felt compassion for
Mm.
this individual. That was the first time I had felt there was something that I saw that ran through my mind in that time. What is it that he could have possibly experienced in his childhood that caused him to be the way he was towards us? The birth of compassion was born in me because, well, although I tried very hard to hide my tears, I didn't want to show it, especially because everybody else is screaming the opposite. In that time, I was able to come to a place of, it's not an entirely forgiveness, but it was just more of a compassion for that human being. I also knew in that time, I heard many stories that an individual like that's on 16, he was leaving the orphanage, he was graduating. He was gonna go straight to prison. And Russian prisons, post-communism, they're just barely post-communism times. They were cruel. They were not especially for young ones. They were not something to look forward to. So compassion was, and to this day, I have that. I have that in me. I have compassion towards my abusers that have taken advantage of me, because the only thing that runs through my head when I try to understand is I know they must not have been this way. I mean, when we're kids, we're not like that. And what was it that he would have suffered through that caused him to, you know,
Mhm.
to be the to exactly what's been done to him, basically, per se.
Yeah.
And and so it was a hard one, Jen. That was a hard
It'll
one
be
to overcome.
horrible. You have so many really horrible images in your mind, that are there. So, oh, whew.
I'm
And then
sorry.
no, it's hard stuff. Yeah. But out of that, you ended up in in a family. Tell me about that.
So on my 15th year there was this. So I was one of the students. I was one of the best students in the orphanage. And our reward in that time was you don't have to sit in the classroom all day long, because the discipline had changed. Now we were doing schooling from 8 in the morning till 10 at night to keep kids out of trouble. because there was less workers now. Well, there was less workers now, and there was no way to keep everybody under control. There's just so many of us. And so the best way to do it is keep us in one particular environment for a long time. And for me, in this particular case, I had great grades. And so I was allowed to be a hall monitor often. And I was given the shovel and I was in charge of making sure there's no ice on the steps outside and things like that, or maybe even sweeping the hallways. So that was my reward. I looked forward to it, Jen. That was like those were my best times because I felt free.
Yeah.
So it was one of those times. It was November when I was standing and doing exactly that, beating the ice through the on the steps when this cart pulled in. Now, where I grew up in the village, it was rare to see a car. Mostly, it was horse and buggy. Everything was moved about with a horse and buggy. So I relate a lot to the early 1900s and even prior to that, actually, because it was just the way it was for us. There was limited resources. And so horse and buggy is how we move potatoes around and a load of cabbages and beets and this and that, bring it from the fields and whatnot. So when I see this little car pulling in, it's yellow and it's taxi, basically. I knew it didn't come from anywhere near. It was like, I don't know, at least 45 minutes away, if not further, because that was the closest big city. And I was like, and then I see all these people coming out of the car. It was like a translator, a lady that does the paperwork, and then the lady that wants to adopt, and then a bodyguard, and then a driver. So all these people are coming out of the car, and I look at this one individual stood out, which was the lady in the snowsuit. She looked like an Eskimo covered. She was so well covered, and I'm like, my coat is like up to here now because I mean we had to hold on to the only piece of clothing we had for years because post post communism, we had nothing anymore. So it was our only last piece that we had of clothing. And so I'm standing there with no hat, no gloves. I mean, that was just the norm. No socks, holes in my shoes and sleeves up to here. And I look at her and I'm like, I sure would love to be in that snowsuit right about now. It just looked, it just looked
What?
warm. It just looked wonderful. So anyway, but I knew she was here to adopt. I did. And in that time, when there was somebody there to adopt, they tried to keep even more. They tried the hardest to keep all the kids in classrooms because all these kids come running at these people. They're not going to know who to take. It's hard. So they really had to keep that under control. Well, in this particular case, I just happened to be there when this car pulled up. And I ran up to her and I said, take me, take me. And the bodyguard pushed me away. Traveling with the bodyguard in that time was very common, apparently, because there was a lot of stopping of the cars. The hooligans would abuse and kill literally, and leave them for dead and things like that, steal clothes and whatnot. So anyway, the translator looks at me and she says, no, no, you're too big. She's here for meek, for little ones. And I said, well, but of course, I already knew that they're there. They're here for the little ones. Who's going to want me at this age? I'm 15 and I'm just too tall at this point and too old. And so, but there was a special look that she gave me that really it grabbed my attention for that split moment. It gave me like some sort of a slight chance of hope. And so as the day went on, we were headed back in the evening towards our dorms when a group of kids came. She went in the office to look at the kids, and the group of kids came running at me and like, Lilia, they want you in the office. This was like 9 o'clock at night. It was already There was late. A group of children come running at me and they said, Lilia, they want you in the office. And normally when you get called to the office, you're thinking you're in trouble. So but see that they were all like really happy looking. I was like, okay, it must not be too bad then. So anyway, they were like, the car is still here. The car is still here. That lady's still here. And so, of course, I made my way to the office and I walked in and the director looked at me. The lady was sitting there and she had two girls. One of them was on her lap and the other one was on the translator's lap, Ina and Christina. And she looks at me and the director looks at me and stands next to me. And he puts his arm on my shoulder and says, Lilia, how would you like to go to America? And I was like, I lost consciousness. I passed out because I was so taken by that and I was so overwhelmed with the news. I was like, what? It's like, is this like real? Really? I was in disbelief. And when it came back to myself, I was just, and the director looks at me and says, now she needs to make a phone call really quick. She needs to make a call and find out for sure with her spouse if everything is okay. Well, in that time, this was in the mid 90s. And to make a phone call meant like a fax machine. That was the only way. And this is already late at night. And it's a 7 hour difference. There is just so much of that. So I am in the hallway now. They sent me out in the hallway to wait to see this answer, what this answer is going to be, because now we're waiting for the approval from the potential father. And so let me tell you, Jen, that was the longest wait of my life. It was horrible. What if they change their mind? What if he says no and things like that? There was just so much running through my
Oh,
head.
like anxiety.
It was something. Well, to make a long story short, here I am in America. Fast forward. um, I wanted to go back, talk about families and things like that. I wanted to go back in the orphanage. Obviously, we lacked a great deal of not just the basic needs of clothes and food, but we also were lacking, or even like safety, emotional. It was pretty much non-existent. So when I heard the word love for the first time, it was when missionaries telling us about this guy named Jesus and his unconditional love for humanity. When I stood next to these missionaries, I finally was able to get through the crowd because there were so many of us trying to touch them and everything. It was the very first time their touch on my shoulder felt like it was not for any other reason, but it meant care. And it was the first time I felt that
Mhm.
emotional aspect. There was a couple of maybe like 10 kids out of like 800 almost that did get to go home to their families in the summertime or during the holidays. And it was then when I was learning, and I spent a lot of times in the hospitals. I was in and out a lot as a child. And I would hear and see like aunt, uncle, mother, father, brother, sister. I was fascinated by the titles and what each one meant. I didn't know what any of it was.
Mm.
The first little girl that I met when I was 3 that said, "Get under the covers." She had a twin brother named Nisha, and her name was Mila. And they had a special touch. They had a special something, and I could see it in them in that early years. And I wanted that. I was like, "Oh, brother, what is that? I want that. I know there's something special there." Wanting to be held was non-existent. I wanted to be held my whole childhood. I remember. I just was, hold me, please. I would love to be held. So the emotional aspect was it didn't exist, the emotional. And so for me, I mean, I'm hearing this adopted family. I'm here. I'm going to have a father, a mother, brothers and sisters. And then 2 of the girls are adopted as well. It's just, I was so overwhelmed with that, Jen. It was just some of
I
the
can't even.
best. I didn't even know how to calculate it in my head. Like, how is this going to be? Like, how does this get put together? I was just so fascinated by the word family.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah.
You know?
And not only a family, but people who wanted to love you and give you the things that you needed, physical and emotional and, yeah.
Jen, I will say my adoption after coming to America, I'm I'm gonna say it's not exactly a Cinderella fairy tale. Unfortunately, there was forms of abuse. But I will, and this is not an excuse or anything. Today, now that I'm a Christian, and I'll go back and go back to some of these things. I am most My gratitude was born in that time for these people. Gratitude was born in that time. I was most thankful that I am here, that they've taken me out of that miserable place. And it didn't matter whatever else happened. It was okay. You see what I'm saying? It was one of those things where I was like, I'm out of this place. Although I was experiencing the crushiness of the physical abuses in a couple of different forms was also like a it was overwhelming as well. Like, I can't believe I thought I was in a safe place and here it's happening again and things like that. So fast forward a few years after I had moved out of my adopted home, that they separated. They've not been together since. I moved out on my own about 17 and a half or so. I was walking through the mall. And it was one of those times where I saw a table booth and I have not seen anything hold me in a long time. Hold me for me meant like something Ruski, something like a matryoshka doll. I see a table with all the Russian stuff and all the Russian memorabilia and little stacking dolls. And I'm like, oh, it was the closest and the first thing I've seen in a long time that screamed home in the way. You know what I mean? Like meaning familiar, something part of my childhood. And so I met the young man, and let me tell you, one of the best. God did some amazing things there. He met a random Russian youth group at a park 2 weeks later, and then calls me and says, "Look, I was depressed in that time, Jen. I was working 3 jobs, trying to live, survive, pay my own rent. Beyond grateful, though. My heart was full of gratitude always in that time because I knew I was finally in the place where I can make things happen. I can have work. I can pay for things. It was just phenomenal, experiencing all kinds of stuff in that same time. And so now I'm meeting this Russian youth group for the first time, and I'm get to spend time with these families. And so families like what it's like to be with a family that knows how to pray, that knows how to talk about difficult things. I spent these 3 or 4 families have shown me so many different examples of what I couldn't take I couldn't take fast enough. I couldn't take fast enough of what I was seeing and experiencing for my own. I was like, I want that. I want that. It was for the first time I felt like I could have a family of my own one day. I could get married. I could have children. It was the first time I felt that, like, it's possible. Just look at these families. Look at how they do things. Look at how they deal with difficult things. Look at how they celebrate Christmas. And look at how the siblings love on each other. And look at how siblings talk to each other and they pray with each other. There was just so many wonderful things I've taken from this. God has blessed me in that time to meet several of these families from the Russian background and also from the American background. Homeschooling families. They were large families. They were like 9 kids in one family. This other one had 7 kids. I mean, they were large families. And it was for the first time I felt like I was in a place where I could start praying for my own future husband. I was learning these type of things. I was learning the qualities of a Christian person, that I could
But
receive.
a hope, and you finally had a hope and a future.
Yes, I was feeling that for the first time and not depressed. I was working 3 jobs and like I had nobody. I had nobody in that time. And so what had happened was it was one of those times where the youth group would travel to a lot of different states for mission for conferences, youth conferences. And it was in Chicago when there was an altar call and to come to Jesus, whoever wants to accept Jesus today. And so it was my turn, Jen. Little did I realize in that time. When the altar call happened, I had no idea how I ended up on the stage. All I know is I had my eyes closed. I was in a very deep prayerful state for the first time asking for forgiveness, first time asking Christ into my heart. And I just followed the light. Whatever that light was, I just followed that light. And it wasn't until like all of a sudden, all these hands landed on me to start praying over me. And when I was like, oh, I'm here. I was so taken by that. How did I even ended up here? It was the most amazing time. But that was it was the birth of coming to Christ for the first time, accepting Christ into my heart. It was my early 20s. And let me tell you, things just started changing for the better. It was for the first time I learned like the art of forgiveness, forgiving. I was forgiven and I could also forgive my abusers, forgive all who has done wrong by me. And that journey of my Christian life began. And I was just filled with gratitude in that time, remembering how God has granted me this blessing of being able to meet these people and these families and to experience a family setting that actually could possibly exist even for me. So fast forward, Jen. So here I am. That does exist for me.
What do you think, if you could narrow down just to a couple of things, what has been the biggest impact of Jesus being in your life?
Gosh, so many things, Jen. I don't even know where to begin. I think, that's- wow, there's so many. It's a hard one because Jesus was able to come and fill in a lot of those foundational bricks that were missing in my childhood. So, I mean, he was my first understanding love, and a sense of belonging, and ability to forgive. I can have a soft heart, and my heart always did remain soft from that moment when I had compassion for that young man that killed himself. There's just so many things. And overall, I just knew that there is hope. I'm not lost. I'm not without help, hope. If at any which time I ever needed help, I can just turn and talk to Jesus. And that comes to me. Not always, not in the time when I always wanted to happen, but because I've learned that God's timing is not always my timing.
Right?
That's been a hard lesson to overcome. But yes, today I just wanted to say that today I've been married for 19 years. I have 4 children. I mean, the granting of those blessings has just followed me throughout my life, and remaining faithful, knowing that without Christ, without Christ, we're nothing. Without Christ, I mean, and those missionaries come into a place of darkness and despair and to be the light of Jesus Christ and to bring hope. Those were fascinating times in my life. They were like most hopeful times in my life. Like, yes, there is this thing and it's Jesus Christ and it's hope.
And not only that,
Um,
you know that those missionaries were praying for you all that time.
Oh my goodness. Amen to that. I always, when I meet people, and I meet a lot of people that have been missionaries, I tell them thank you. And I tell them I'm one of those, I'm the product of that hope that you brought to the orphanage that existed in that time for all of us. Because I mean, we children, we were so desperate for that emotional touch, for that emotional love. We were so desperate for someone to show their care for us. We cleaned on to anything and everything in that time. And so when these people came and they were like the first light of goodness, you better believe it, Jen. We were grabbing on to them. Those poor folks, man, they hold on to their clothes probably for a minute. They were like, yes, yes. It was just so good to us. God has been so, so good, Jen, throughout my entire life. I'm without words. When I think and recollect my memories, speaking of memories, God has been so, so amazing
Yeah.
throughout that entire journey.
Yes, yeah.
Speaking of the memories, Jen, go ahead, ask me if you'd like.
One thing I wonder about is how has your past formed you as a mother?
That's a really good question. I didn't know what it was like to be a mother. The only thing, the only thing that I grabbed onto, it was like I was like a sponge in that time when I met these families for the first time. I was sponging everything in because I wanted all of those things. And then I had the blessing of having a lot of families to take examples from because I didn't belong particular to any one particular family that has given me that foundation. I had an opportunity to grab on from a lot of these different foundations that were already in place. Let me tell you, it's one of the greatest blessings. And I was able to pull a little bit from here and there and there. And I was able to slowly, hopefully, I've done okay by my kids. Let's just put it that way. It's been a hard journey. I mean, I have had a lot of learning to do. I have not always done well when I think my greatest lack through the years, I've had the strong faith. I've had the Christian desire to to always do well as a Christian, but I have lacked greatly in my emotional health. And so it was about 6 years ago, I began the journey of emotional healing, but I dove into some serious counseling. I had tried different counseling techniques with Christians, particular Christian settings, Christian counseling that had helped me a lot. It had helped me to take on and just sort of memorize some of the habits or cope with some of the things in those times, right? During the last 30 years in America, pretty much per se. But this particular one was actually different. And all of my counseling in the past, a lot of them are very similar. You take an onion and when we're sitting down in the room, it's almost like, okay, Lilia, let's go ahead and pull away one peel at a time. Well, when I start pulling one peel at a time, I've got so many traumas. It's like in 1 hour, it's not enough to get to the center of that peel away concept. And so this particular counseling, one of my friends suggested, they came into our life. I've written about them also. They came into our life just in that right time. And she says, Lily, I think you would really benefit from this particular counseling. It's called the Murray Method. And wait, I'm showing the wrong book.
Okay.
It's
Oh,
called
okay.
the Murray Method. It's to deal with traumas. But her method is amazing. First of all, it's God-centered. There's four main pillars of our existence: the spiritual, intellectual, physical, and emotional, with God in the center. So it's called PIES: physical, intellectual, spiritual, and emotional. And with God in the center, her primary focus, she's like, I'm not your doctor. If you need a physical address, go to your doctor. I'm not your pastor. If you need a spiritual address, go to your pastor. But I can help you with emotional. And so her particular program only focuses on the emotional aspect with God in the center. So yeah, her program, when I started it 6 years ago, it was like 1 week in depth, like 40 hours of work, but I dove all the way into the bottom. And I mean to the bottom, to the beginning. The beginning is the very first being of you, which is the birth. She likes to refer to the nest, basically. Family of origin is another way of saying it. And so that particular program helped me tremendously because I dove in, because I started at the very beginning of my birth. I was able to deal with everything and one by one in that way. Instead of me remembering what I ate yesterday for lunch and dinner, I instead the program is designed in a way where you're able to dive all the way in, and you do have a lot of memories come up, and you are able to, and you're in a safe place to be able to recollect them and pretty much relive them in the mental way. But there's a safe place to be able to work through it. Anyway, it was God sent, Jen. It was such an amazing experience. It has transformed me and changed me so much when it comes to my emotional health. And so here I am 6 years later. Because of that particular journey that I did, it also, God opened up a lot of other doors. And one of the doors was meeting my biological family for the first time, my mother.
Oh,
Uh, 3 years ago, my husband got me a DNA kit, and I told him, don't bother. I already read the reviews. Most of them are just American English kind of folks. They're not going to have Slavic ancestry on there. But I did it. I ended up doing it. Well, little do you know, and it's all written in the book. And little do you know, 4 weeks later, I received the results. You have a first cousin living in the U.S. A spitting image of me. I thought I saw myself for the first time, but in someone else.
hmm.
To make a long story short, we traveled last year to meet my mother for the first time and my half sisters. And I'm the 24th cousin out of this entire large family. I'm like the missing piece of the puzzle. Of course, it was a shock to them, and that's going to be my next book. But this whole journey is going to be my next book, God willing. But it was a fascinating reunion. It was such a wonderful. We got to go with my husband and my four children last year, and when I got back, I had a strong prompting of writing my book. The first desire of wanting to write the book happened 28 years ago. when I had just arrived to US and everybody was fascinated by my stories. They wanted to hear, for some reason, just people wanted to hear what it was like growing up. They were not exciting things to share, but they were like so taken by that. Tell us more, tell us more. So I wanted to write my book then, but English barriers, I hardly understood anything in that time. So my second desire, I wanted to write a book is 19 years ago when I met my husband. He was supposed to be the guy to help me write my book. But instead, Jen, we got married and had 4 kids. So that got shelved for 19 years. And I know, right? But this time I knew it was God's calling because the prompting was so strong. But this time I was throwing curveballs at God and saying, no, God, you already know my insecurities. If I wanted to write this book, first of all, you know how I feel about my English language. I really could use a female, first of all, Christian editor. And if it's not too much to ask, could we have a female editor?
I
So
love you, honey, but you're not the right person.
I know, right? It was November 5th, actually. And that morning I heard that, and it was that voice, as soon as I finished praying exactly that, throwing the curveballs, that voice was loud and clear. Right. So I said, okay, fine. I'll sit down and write. For some reason, I was fighting to do it. I didn't fight it 19 years ago, and I didn't fight it 28 years ago. But this time I was just fighting it. And I just had a lot of insecurities and everything else. So as I begin to write on the third day, well, the way I've formed my book, but on the third day is when I met one of my Christian friend ladies, and she says, Lilia, I have the perfect person for you. And she is a female and she's a Christian and you're going to absolutely love her. So it was basically, it's history from there. So
Yeah.
She has helped me to edit my book. She did an amazing job. By the way, for whoever's listening, I have a book that's been published. It's called Open Fields and Iron Curtains. Most of the older generations know what Iron Curtains is referred to. It's the former Soviet Union. It's like the closed system regime and this and that. And so she helped me to keep my voice and my origin of my experiences.
Yeah.
And Jen, the book that I have written, it's not one of those things. It's literally a visceral experience. It's not going to be
Easy.
they are short story. They're short story formats, and it's going to be pretty much like there's no intellect. You're going to walk in my shoes, and you're going to walk in my shoes in chronological order. You're going to grow with me from birth to age 15. And it only covers, it's a biography, and it only covers my first 15 years of my life. But I will tell you, Jen, what the best thing that happened to me of writing this book, if I had written this book 28 years ago, it would have been doom and gloom. If I had written this book 19 years ago, it would have been doom and gloom and dark. I have written this book only 5 months ago, it got published. And after that emotional therapy that I did, I had a meeting with Marilyn, the lady that has written the book. She says, Lilia, for you, it would be good to take your trauma, my traumas, list of traumas written in the regular hand. It was like 10 feet long. There was just so much. The book doesn't even cover everything, but you'll get a pretty good idea. Yeah. And she says, Lilia, you will take and you will translucent paper over all of your traumas. And now that you've gone through a lot of this healing process, you need to go back and revisit and remember and recall what were the times and what were the things that happened in that time that interrupted something of that sort that allowed you to live, that allowed you to survive, that allowed you to overcome. And she says she likes to call them God moments. So I like to call them God highlights. They're like, and so this book is a really good, well-balanced book now of so much goodness. It's like you're going to experience the good, the bad, and the ugly all under the sun because so yes, it's not all dark anymore. It is truly The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah. And I think that's so important to go back and see where God was in those situations, but you didn't recognize it at the time because you didn't understand who God was. But now that you know him, now it's easier to go back and really see, oh yeah, he was here and he was there. And yeah.
Oh my, that was one of the best experiences I had, was recollecting and remembering and recognizing some of the things that happened that interrupted the whatever it was that helped me to survive. And I was like, oh wow, God, you have been so good to me my whole life. I can truly go back now, and I have gained the ability to even be thankful for those bad moments. I have gained the ability, because if I didn't experience them, yes, they were horrible. They were horrific. If I didn't experience them, and if God didn't allow for the process and to overcome, and if I wouldn't be standing here today speaking about it, it's me taking the time to recognize like where God, which was everywhere at all times, he was present and helping us to get through and survive. And
Yeah.
it's been amazing.
Well, Lilia, thank you so much. I'll put links in the show notes for your books. And then if you think of anything else that you'd like to be added there, what's the last thing you'd like to leave with our listeners?
To all my listeners and my readers, guys, I've got so many of you guys. You guys are a wonderful blessing. Thank you for your support. I really wanted to, more than anything, encourage them to encourage all of you to not be so focused on the negative aspect of my being and of my upbringing, but rather take the time to revisit your past and take the time to acknowledge where were the times that God was present in your life that helped you to overcome and be where you are today. Because otherwise, you wouldn't be here listening to me speaking. So, each and every one of us has that. And graces, there are many graces. So I would want to encourage all my readers and my listeners to do exactly that. And for the final, I also have a verse that I would like to share that speaks a great deal to me. Would that be okay, Jen? Okay. To grant to those who mourn in Zion, to give them a beautiful headdress instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the garment of praise instead of a faint spirit, that they may be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he may be glorified. Isaiah 61:3.
Love
And
that.
thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for letting me share. It's been such a great blessing, Jen.
Wow. Another powerful story of what God does. Just even how he reached down to her when she was drowning and pulled her out, that miracle there to say, I'm here. I'm right beside you. I'm holding on to your hand. Wow. Brings tears to my eyes. Just that power. I think what's wonderful about Lilia's story is that God was with her from the time she was little. You might say, but where was he when she was raped or hungry or passed over? Lilia sees it differently in hindsight. At the time, she was able to recognize where God, which was everywhere at all times, he was present and helping her to get through and survive. Lilia said not to be focused on the negative aspect of her upbringing, but rather take the time to revisit your past and take the time to acknowledge where the times were that God was present in your life that helped you to overcome and where you are today. This deeply moving episode with Lilia, we are reminded of the power of resilience and faith in the face of that. This was a moving episode with Lilia Kleczinski, and we are reminded of the power of resilience and faith in the face of unimaginable adversity. Lilia's story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the unwavering presence of divine grace, even in the darkest of times. Her journey from a life of profound suffering to one of redemption and hope is truly inspiring. We hope that her experiences have touched your heart and opened your eyes to the remarkable ways in which lives can be transformed. Thank you for joining us in this emotional and uplifting conversation. And I would definitely recommend her book. So you might want to go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble and find that because, wow, what a testament. And a book to be shared with others. So blessings, my friend, and I look forward to joining you next week. Blessings, my friend. I look forward to joining you next week when we will hear from Shayla Huber, who will be talking about things God has shown her about marriage. So we'll see you next time. That's all for today. Did you know it's easy to share an episode with your friends? When the podcast is open, look for 3 dots. Click on them, and you'll see various options. You can download the episode, play it next or last, go to the show, save the episode, or copy the link. Isn't technology amazing? Hey, I'm looking forward to you joining me next time. I hope you have a great week.